This dress started out with 2 sketches. So this was the first one that was inspired by the Emerson dress from Abercrombie, except I added a ruffle on the bottom of the skirt and then I added a ruffle on the ends of the sleeves. And the second one, I wanted to go for a more summery vibe, but then the Emerson, I put it up to an Instagram poll and this dress is actually the one that won, so I made a pattern for it. And the good thing about taking inspiration from a dress that already exists is that you can literally just look at the seams and then figure out where the pattern pieces are. This is the fabric that I'm using. I'm using a red cotton fabric. I chose cotton just because I like the way it flows and I feel like it matches the vibe of the dress, and also it's summer and cotton is a pretty lightweight fabric. Usually people will say that when you're making a dress for the first time, especially if you're making your own pattern, to prototype it, which is a good idea, like you should probably do that, but I never do that because I will get bored if I make the same dress twice, and I feel like if it turns out good in the prototype, then I just wasted my time and I'm just going to be making the same dress twice for no reason. That's not a good mindset to have, which is what I've realized because I make a lot of mistakes. This dress actually turned out pretty cute. There were some mistakes that were definitely avoidable if I made a prototype, but I'm probably never going to do that, so I actually messed up on that hem. I folded it the wrong way, so the wrong side would be facing outside. So I had to seam rip it and then redo it. And then this is the pleats that are gonna go on the front bodice. You just want to pin all of them down and make sure they're symmetrical on both sides so that there's no weird lines forming. And then I just use my straightener to like straighten them out. And when you're sewing the pleats down, this is really annoying because you have to make sure that they're symmetrical on both sides. Otherwise, there's gonna be like weird lines forming in the fabric. It wasn't that bad. You want to sew lines on the inside to keep those pleats in place, so even if you stretch them or you like put them in the wash, the pleats don't get messed up. And then you want to cut all those excess threads so that they don't get caught in your sewing machine. A puff sleeve is one of the most easiest things to sew because it's mostly the same shape no matter like what size you're making it. If it's a long sleeve or a short sleeve, the shape is always the same, and you just make it bigger than your arm size so that when you put the elastic in, it cinches around your arm and creates a puff sleeve. And I finish all my seams with a zigzag stitch just so that when you put it in the wash, it doesn't fray and come apart. And then you want to sew an elastic casing for you to slide the elastic through. And this is me using my straightener to sort of iron it out because I'm way too lazy to bring out my iron every time. And then you want to make sure those curves are symmetrical again so that you don't have any weird folds. And then when you're sewing the sleeve into the bodice, you want to make sure that that gap is left open so that you have a place to put the elastic through and you didn't just sew it closed. So to create the frill effect at the end of the sleeve, what I did is I just took a strip of fabric and then folded it in on itself to create a tube and then pinned that inside about like 2 inches away from the end of the sleeve, and then you run elastic through that and it cinches and creates a frill at the end. The skirt for this dress was honestly so easy. It's just like a huge rectangle and then it's gathered at the top. Unless you're stupid like me, because I messed up and I had to add fabric on both sides, which made the process a lot more complicated. But if you're not, it's a lot easier because you just make a huge rectangle and then add a frill at the bottom and then gather it at the top. And then to make the frill like frill up, I did a basting stitch, and I actually had to hand sew this because I was doing it on my machine and then I broke like 3 needles before I decided it wasn't worth it anymore. And then I just sat down and hand sewed it, which it's an easy process. You just pull on the string and then it frills up. And this is not in focus, but this is just me attaching the frill to the bottom of the skirt, which is just like a huge rectangle. And then when you're sewing it on, make sure that there's no weird folds forming, because you can't really see under there when you're sewing the frill. So you want to like check continuously to make sure nothing's folding weird. And then this is me hand sewing the basting stitch on the top. After you connect the skirt to the top, you pull out that basting stitch so that there's no excess thread, and then it all looks really clean and finished. And then I realized after I tried it on that the skirt wasn't gathered enough, so I'm just adding extra sections to the side, which in the first place, if you just make the skirt longer, you wouldn't have to do this. But I didn't do that, so. after all of that, you can finally attach the skirt to the top, which is pretty easy. You just do a single stitch and then a zigzag stitch. And then doing the finishing of the zigzag stitch on the frill was one of the most tedious things I've ever done. I had to use my seam ripper like 10 times. And when you're cutting it, make sure you don't cut too close, otherwise it's gonna fall apart. So you want to sew the back closed until a certain point so that it's still comfortable to pull it over yourself, and the rest of the space you want to close with a zipper. And watch a YouTube tutorial on this because it's honestly really confusing, and you need a zipper foot for sure. I thought it was just one of those things that they say you need but you don't actually need, but you do actually need one, otherwise it looks really bad. Otherwise you can hand sew it, but I hate hand sewing, so I don't want to do that. But after this, you're done. Honestly, this dress turned out super cute and it was pretty easy. There were some mistakes that could have been avoided, but I think the end result turned out really cute and it looks really pretty in the sunlight. One thing is, I don't know what the hell I was thinking wearing Converse with this dress. But anyways, that's the finished product. Hope you enjoyed.